The south of France is startlingly exotic. Its garrigues and steppes have an almost African feel. The sun reigns supreme here from spring until high summer, subjecting living things to even hotter temperatures as the day progresses. How do plants and animals withstand the scorching heat? How have they adapted to these almost tropically hot, dry conditions? Maquis scrubland is one of Europe's distinctive natural ecosystems. It is 8 o'clock in the morning. At this time of day, the sun is still mild. The gentle warmth of its rays wakens animals from hibernation. Hermann's tortoise is a species that has survived from prehistory. It is one of a handful of land tortoises found in Europe and is only encountered in preserved natural landscapes, like this one. Like all reptiles, tortoises need external sources of heat to be active. The horny plates, or scutes, that form their shells work like solar panels. Tortoises are so-called cold-blooded animals, and their level of activity varies with their blood temperature, which in turn depends on the warmth of the sun. It is 9 o'clock. The trees here have adapted to the hot, dry climate. They are the same shape as the acacias that grow in Africa. Next to this quasi-African woodland is one of Europe's few remaining natural steppes, the plain of La Crau, south of the Alpes. This unique natural habitat is home to some very distinctive wildlife. Cattle egrets originally came from Africa, and they hitch a ride on a sheep just as their African cousins do on elephants. The jackdaws are getting in on the act. Okay, their claws dig in a bit, but they pay their way by picking their hosts' backs clean of parasites. Cattle egrets hunt on drier ground than other herons and egrets. They feast on the grasshoppers and crickets disturbed by the sheep. The rarest animal on the steppe of La Crau is Prionotropis rhodanica, an apteris grasshopper. It's endemic here. In other words, this is the only place in the world where it is found. Flightless and stout-bodied, it has adapted to the dry winds that blow across the steppe. It covers remarkably little ground, traveling only about 50 meters during its entire adult life. The many grasshopper and cricket species include Decticus albifrons, a bush cricket that likes the hot, dry habitat here. It eats both insects and plants. Nature recycles everything. For these small creatures, a sheep's dropping is a wonderful find. Door beetles aren't bothered by either the baking sun or the smell of excrement. They may look like midgets, but they are the Mr. Atlases of the insect world. They can lift 1,000 times their weight. This pair are rolling a ball of dung along just like the sacred scarab beetles of ancient Egyptian myth, who were supposed to push the sun along the sky. If you're a door beetle, a dung ball is the ideal bedroom for the children. The little bustard is one of La Croix's rare avian inhabitants. A typical steppe species, it is a mini ostrich the size of a large hen. When the little bustard spots a grasshopper, it snaps it up before you can say, "Jiminy Cricket." Spring is in the air for this male little bustard. His version of a wolf whistle is an odd noise that sounds like a fart. In fact, the species' French name means farting duck bustard, and the sound carries more than a kilometer. The sun climbs inexorably higher, scorching the ground with its burning rays. It is 10 o'clock. In the Massif des Morts, the tortoise's shell has warmed up nicely. He has stored up plenty of heat and trundles off on a mysterious errand. In this dry setting, frogs and insects gravitate to a temporary pool. Like a seasonal watercourse in Africa, it harbors wildlife for a short space of time in the spring. The pond skater locates its prey by skimming along the surface. Young amphibians grow fast in the sun-warmed water. The backswimmer has to do things differently. It hunts upside down just under the water's surface, using its long hind legs as oars and its other legs to catch its prey. Mid-morning is the ideal time to see this strange creature. An amazing transformation is taking place in the long grass. This is one of nature's marvels. A larva wriggles free of its skin. The creature that emerges is closely associated with hot Mediterranean summers. It is a cicada. After several years underground, the insect unfolds its wings to let them dry in the sun. Its soft body hardens. In less than a quarter of an hour, it acquires its adult shape and turns brown. It is now ready to live its life as an adult, which lasts for just one summer. No sooner is its transformation complete than the male cicada begins to sing. He does so by vibrating two small membranes called timbales several hundred times a second. The sound is amplified in two resonating cavities which occupy virtually the whole of his abdomen. Cicadas are literally ventriloquists. Some other musicians have just arrived from Africa, migrating birds who come to nest in France in the summer during the hot season. The most colorful of all are the bee-eaters. Their dazzling plumage adds a tropical note to the landscape. They are known locally as African hunters. The bee-eater tribe gathers in the maquis and breeding pairs begin to form. They set up home in a sandy bank. Bee-eaters live in burrows like rabbits. They break the surface with their beaks and then dig with their feet. Both cock and hen birds work frantically to complete their burrow. The tunnels can be up to 2 meters long. It is late spring. The sun beats down on the plain as Hermann's tortoise marches doggedly on towards its unknown goal. Its quest takes it through French lavender, buttercups, and Serapia's orchids. The orchids have put on a gorgeous display to attract pollinating insects. Each one is a tropically exuberant feast of color. The insects detect the plants from a distance by scent, color, and the heat they produce. The bees concentrate on the lavender and rosemary. Meanwhile, the owlfly warms itself, spreading its wings to absorb the sunlight. Sunbathing is a must for owlflies, so they are only found in hot regions. They are predators, feeding mainly on flies. They look a bit like butterflies with dragonfly wings, but in fact, they belong to neither family. The intense heat here allows animals to accumulate a lot of solar energy. Excited by the rising temperature, the jewel-bright rose chafers guzzle flowers. They are originally from the tropics and love to bask in the sun. The typically Mediterranean bush cricket, Barbatiste fiscari, likes the shrubs of the maquis. Like all grasshoppers and crickets, it hears with its legs. Its ears are holes in the tibias of its front legs. These Barbatiste are tucking into the plants, but they could well end up making a tasty meal for someone else. In early summer, there seem to be insects fluttering in all directions. It is 11 o'clock, feeding time for the bee eaters. The male bird woos his intended with gifts as a preliminary to mating. A little bit like taking her out to dinner. Bee eaters don't just eat bees. Their diet includes wasps, butterflies, beetles, and dragonflies. They can spot an insect a centimeter long from 100 meters away. The hen bird is eventually won over by a combination of the baking heat and her suitor's gift. Time is wearing on, but the Hermann's tortoise has not abandoned his quest. Finding a partner is a challenge for a species this rare. They don't often encounter another member of their species. At last, as he rounds a bush, the male tortoise comes upon a female. He hastens to seize the opportunity. His courtship is perfunctory. No nonsense about little presents or dinner invitations. He doesn't so much kiss the female as give her a series of nips to make her stay still. The curious love song of Hermann's tortoise rises from the thyme bushes. The male tortoise's plastron, his underside is concave so as to accommodate the female shell. His partner doesn't seem to be sold on the idea, but she doesn't have much choice. He has a hooked penis that ensures she remains firmly anchored. As soon as the business of mating is finished, the female heads off. It is courting time for the cicadas, too. Their song is primarily a mating call. The male insect is informing females of his availability. The females themselves have no call, but they don't have any problem getting the message. Male cicadas may be good musicians, but they aren't always very observant. Sometimes they attempt to mate with other males. Cicada courtship can take a long time. The cicada sings all day long, all summer long, while their neighbors, the ants, gather food for the winter. The fable was right about the ants. Harvester ants gather prey and seeds to feed their larvae, soldiering tirelessly on however hot it gets. There's a lot of traffic on the routes they use to get to and from their underground nest, buried deep to protect it from the scorching heat. It is noon on the Great Plain. In summer, the temperature soars to over 30 degrees Celsius. The heat becomes oppressive. A race against time is taking place. The marsh creek is drying up. And the vital necessity of water is becoming acutely rare. The bees need water to make honey, so they are hurrying to suck up what is left of this precious liquid. The heat is gradually bringing everything to a standstill. Insects and reptiles are the only animals still showing their faces outside. These weird-looking creatures live alongside each other in crevices in the rocks, not competing with each other. The maquis is home to the jeweled lizard. At 80 centimeters long, it is Europe's biggest lizard, the nearest thing we have to an iguana. The Moorish wall gecko comes from Africa. Equipped with suckers, it is a superb climber and hunts by lying in wait and then making a sudden dart. It is mainly nocturnal, whereas the jeweled lizard much prefers the daytime. The stones are scorching hot, and the lizard has to keep finding a new place. There is no shade on the plain of La Croix. The only birds to be seen gliding in the hot air currents are raptors that have migrated from Africa. Even though it is used to the tropics, this black kite is finding the heat stifling. At 1 o'clock, it is 35 degrees Celsius in the shade. The maquis is baking in the heat. This is the time of day when the sun is the highest in the sky and radiates the most heat, the toughest part of the day for living things. Without the heat of the sun, there would be no life, but in midsummer, that heat becomes almost unbearable. In the beating sun, plants shrivel and the ground becomes parched. The various species that inhabit the steppe and the garrigues have evolved different strategies for survival. The snails take refuge at the top of plants to avoid getting scorched on the burning hot ground, sealing themselves into their shells so as not to dry out. Oppressed by the heat, the lizards drag themselves to a patch of shade. Birds do not sweat. Instead, to cool themselves, they open their beaks and pant. Only the bee-eaters carry on sunbathing, but then they're used to African temperatures. Hermann's tortoise also avoids the heat of the noonday sun. If it falls on its back, that could be the end of it. If it stayed upside down in direct sunlight, it would fry. But the tortoise keeps its cool. Everywhere in the Massif des Morts, tortoises are heading for shady nooks suitable for an afternoon nap. Plants cannot protect themselves from drying out by moving out of the sun or taking shelter, so they have evolved some highly inventive alternative resistance tactics. Grasses wither and die in the blazing heat, but their seeds remain fertile. Scattered by the wind, they carry on the species. Stone crops use a different ploy. Like cactuses in the desert, they store water in their swollen, bladder-like leaves. Many plants manage to stay green even in the height of summer by sucking up water from deep underground. Their long roots can reach down to underground water reserves. Having narrow leaves helps them limit evaporation. Other plants are covered with a layer of wax or have a thick outer skin. The heat of the summer is a threat for all living organisms, but animals also have to be on the lookout for predators. Some hide in the vegetation. The stick insect is a past master of camouflage. The conehead mantis is similarly muted in color. It is related to the praying mantis and often adopts the same posture, but it isn't praying. It is stalking its prey, ready to shoot at its forelimbs and grab at a moment's notice. There is something distinctly satanic about the mantis larva, with its evil little horned head. It borrows its colors from the plant world, and its movements imitate a twig swaying in the breeze. All these strategies serve a purpose. In the garrigue, tiny but formidable predators are laying their traps. The spider's web may be invisible, but it is both strong and sticky. Its prey is doomed. The spider, an Argipilopita, wraps it in silken threads before biting it, first to paralyze it, then to liquefy it. Now it can suck up the insect like a milkshake. The same fate awaits the cicada, trapped by this wasp spider. For some, life is suspended by the heat. For others, it comes to an abrupt end. In the mountains of the Luberon Massif, a strange bird of prey is perched on top of a cedar. It is an Egyptian vulture, the smallest vulture species found in Europe. With its yellow mask, it looks like a caricature of an undertaker. It nests in caves and hollows in sheer rock faces. It mainly eats carrion and excrement, but is not adverse to live insects. Its chick is already quite big, and just as handsome as its daddy. It is late August now, and the chick will soon be migrating to Africa, where it will remain for 4 or 5 years. It will return to Europe when it is old enough to breed. Towards the end of the day, the temperature starts to drop and the heat becomes bearable again. This hoopoe is hunting for food for its young. It is nested in an old empty house. Like many of the birds here, it's a migrant from Africa, an ambassador from the tropics. The soil of the plain is dry and hard. The female tortoise has developed an amazing trick to get round this problem. To soften the ground, she empties her bladder on the spot where she has decided to dig her nest. Then she lays her white eggs there, taking her time about it. Once buried, the eggs will be incubated by the sun for about 3 months. At dusk, a whole new world is stirring, a world that belongs to the creatures of the night. In the Alpes, a discreetly efficient predator is emerging from its hidey hole. The eagle owl waits patiently for sundown before setting off on its hunting trip. It is a deadly hunter, able to turn its head 270 degrees, with large eyes that can see in almost pitch darkness and hearing so acute it can detect every tiny rustle. Its specialty is audio camouflage. Its wing feathers are edged with a fine down that absorbs sound, enabling it to fly without making any noise. Its attack comes like a bolt from the blue. The eagle owl bears off its prey to eat in its nest. As discreet as the eagle owl, a miniature panther slips through the darkness. This small spotted mammal is a genet, a cat-like African predator, probably imported by man centuries ago. It has sensed danger. The cooling nocturnal reprieve has not lasted long. Parched to a crisp by the heat, the plants have flared up like torches. It has not taken much to shatter the fragile balance. Whether by accident or as a result of human carelessness, something has sparked off a fire that is sweeping through the maquis. In the distance, there is frantic human activity. At dawn the next day, the vegetation is still burning. The daylight reveals a blackened landscape. Fire shares many attributes with living beings. It is born, moves around, feeds, reproduces, and eventually dies. But the flames have swept through the vegetation. The plant's seeds have survived and are still fertile. The inferno has prompted the pine cones to open early and release their seeds, like a promise of renewal. Winged creatures are the first to reappear. Then the ants emerge from their underground shelter. As if to heal the wounds inflicted by the fire, refreshing rain quenches the soil. The warm downpour stirs the maquis to a new life. In the burned area, underground bulbs, roots, and seeds have survived intact and begun to grow. The top layer of soil is the worst affected, but the ash helps plants regenerate by fertilizing the soil. Fire both destroys and creates. It has played an important part in the history of the garrigue. Fire was used by man to clear the primeval forest, creating the Mediterranean landscapes as we now know them. Many of the plants here have adapted to survive intermittent fires over thousands of years. The cork oak is protected by its thick bark, which makes a highly effective fire blanket. This one has come through the flames largely unscathed. From one year to the next, nature gradually regains ground, and the scars left by the fire disappear. Broom seeds have survived the fire, and the yellow flowers are adorning the maquis once again. Higher up, we encounter more harbingers of new life. A female cicada is planning ahead, laying several dozen eggs under the bark of tree branches. When they hatch, the larvae will come down from the tree. They will then spend several years underground before the landscape throbs with their mating call. Summer is nearly over. On the plain, the migrating birds are gathering for the long flight home. Insects are becoming rare here, and they will soon be setting off for Africa. It is September. Buried deep underground, the Hermann's tortoise eggs have hatched. One of the young tortoises breaks through its shell. The rain-softened ground allows the newly hatched tortoise to dig its way up to the surface. The little tortoise emerges from its incubator to embark on a new life. A life cycle is drawing to an end in the maquis. To withstand intense heat and intermittent fires, the plants and animals here have developed strategies akin to those deployed by tropical species. The Mediterranean winter is calm and mild. The landscape and its wildlife rest while they wait for summer to return, bringing with it the brightly colored birds that add an African note to the chorus of the maquis.